In 1975, a 24-year-old Kodak engineer built something that had never existed before, the world's first digital camera. His bosses saw it, panicked, and buried it. The invention they hid would eventually come back and destroy everything they'd built. To understand how catastrophically stupid that decision was, you need to understand how powerful Kodak really was. Rochester, New York, the 1970s. Kodak owned 90% of the American film market. Their yellow boxes were in every drugstore, every airport, every vacation bag on the planet. Kodak Moment wasn't just a slogan. It was part of the English language itself. Over 100,000 employees, billions in revenue, all of it built on one product. And that product had a fatal weakness nobody wanted to talk about. Film. Beautiful, profitable, irreplaceable film. Every roll sold meant guaranteed revenue, not just from the film itself, but from the chemicals, the paper, the processing. It was a razor and blades model before that phrase even existed. Kodak didn't just sell you the camera. They sold you every single picture you'd ever take with it. George Eastman built this machine back in 1888 with one genius slogan. You press the button, we do the rest. But what happens when someone invents a button that doesn't need film at all? Enter Steve Sasson. 1973. Fresh out of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with an electrical engineering degree. 24 years old. Handed a seemingly throwaway assignment. Figure out if there's any practical use for this new thing called a charge-coupled device, a CCD sensor. His supervisor probably thought it was busy work. Sasson treated it like a mission. He started scavenging parts from around the Kodak labs, a movie camera lens here, some digital circuitry there. What he was building would change the world. December 1975. After nearly 2 years of tinkering, Sasson finished it. The thing was a monster, 8 pounds, roughly the size of a toaster. It used a Fairchild CCD sensor capturing just 0.01 megapixels. It recorded a single black and white image onto a digital cassette tape. The process took 23 seconds. The resolution was 100 pixels by 100 pixels. It was ugly. It was slow. It was crude. And it was the most revolutionary camera ever built. Now Sasson had to show it to the bosses. Sasson carried his 8-pound prototype into a conference room full of Kodak executives. He snapped a photo, waited 23 agonizing seconds, then displayed the image on a television screen. The room went quiet. Then came the questions, and they weren't the ones Sasson expected. Nobody asked how to make it better. Nobody asked about the technology. They asked one thing: when is this going to be ready for consumers? Sasson told them 15 to 20 years. And that answer sealed the camera's fate. 15 to 20 years. That's what the executives heard. And in their minds, that meant one thing: we have time. They didn't see a revolution sitting on that table. They saw a threat that was still decades away. So they made a calculated decision. They told Sasson to keep his mouth shut. Don't show anyone. Don't publish papers. Don't talk about filmless photography. That phrase specifically was forbidden inside Kodak's walls. They locked the prototype and the research away. Not because they didn't understand what it was. That's the part people get wrong. They buried it precisely because they understood exactly what it could do. Here's what Kodak's leadership was staring at. Their film business generated profit margins of around 60 to 70%. 60 to 70%. That's not a business, that's a printing press for money. Every family vacation, every wedding, every baby's first step meant another roll of Kodak film sold. Another roll developed at a Kodak lab, another set of prints on Kodak paper. The entire ecosystem was a closed loop of profit. Digital photography would obliterate every single link in that chain. No film. No chemicals. No processing. No paper. No recurring revenue. Just a memory card you could use 1,000 times. Would you willingly destroy your own gold mine? But here's the thing about suppressing the future: it doesn't stay suppressed. While Kodak was guarding its film profits, engineers in Japan were paying very close attention. Sony launched the Mavica in 1981, an electronic still camera that stored images on floppy disks. It wasn't truly digital, but it proved the concept. Fujifilm, Kodak's fiercest rival, started pouring resources into digital research. Casio released the QV10 in 1995, one of the first true consumer digital cameras. The revolution Kodak tried to lock in a drawer was now walking through the front door, and it was wearing someone else's logo. The cruelest irony? Kodak actually had a head start. They held over 1,000 digital imaging patents. 1,000. They'd been quietly developing digital technology behind closed doors for years. They just refused to bring it to market. In 2001, they even acquired a photo-sharing site called Ofoto. They could have been Instagram a decade before Instagram existed. Instead, they used Ofoto to encourage people to print more digital photos. Print more photos. Every single strategic move Kodak made with digital technology was designed to funnel people back to printing, back to film, back to paper, back to the dying model they couldn't let go of. By the mid-2000s, the hemorrhaging had begun. Film sales were collapsing at a rate of 20 to 30% per year. Kodak started laying off thousands of workers. The city of Rochester, which had essentially been a Kodak company town, started to hollow out. Shopping centers closed. Restaurants emptied. Neighborhoods that once housed Kodak engineers fell into disrepair. But even as the walls crumbled, Kodak's leadership kept insisting that film would survive. They pointed to vinyl records making a comeback. They talked about the warmth and authenticity of analog photography. They were rearranging deck chairs on a ship that had already hit the iceberg. January 19, 2012. Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. 131 years of history gone. The company that invented digital photography was killed by digital photography. On the day Kodak declared bankruptcy, over 250 million photos were being uploaded to Facebook every single day. Every one of them digital. Every one of them filmless. The future Kodak tried to suffocate was now breathing everywhere. Steve Sasson, the man who started it all, spent his entire career at Kodak. 31 years. He watched from the inside as the company buried his invention, ignored the digital revolution, and slowly marched toward its own grave. In 2009, 3 years before the bankruptcy, President Obama awarded Sasson the National Medal of Technology and Innovation for inventing the digital camera. The same invention Kodak's executives told him never to speak about. Sasson later said the hardest part wasn't building the camera. It was watching the people who should have championed it choose to pretend it didn't exist. But Sasson wasn't the only casualty. Rochester lost over 50,000 Kodak jobs. An entire city's economy hollowed out because a boardroom chose quarterly profits over the future. And the saddest part? Kodak had every advantage. The patents, the talent, the research, the brand. They had a 20-year head start on every competitor on Earth. Business schools now teach this as the textbook case of the innovator's dilemma. When a company becomes so invested in its existing success that it cannot bring itself to embrace the very innovation that will define the next era. Kodak didn't fail because they lacked vision. They failed because they were terrified of their own vision. Somewhere in the Smithsonian Institution sits Steve Sasson's original prototype, that ugly 8-pound toaster-sized box that took 23 seconds to capture a single grainy image. It was the future, and the men who held it in their hands chose to lock it in a drawer. They thought they were protecting an empire. They were building its coffin. Some companies die because they can't innovate. Kodak died because they innovated first and then chose to look away.